And this is Justin Feyereisen. You are listening to the Justin Feyereisen Radio Show, Pacific Rim Uprising. So the first movie was directed by Guillermo del Toro, and like I said last week, he's just off his Oscar for Best Director and Best Picture for The Shape of Water. And he did Pacific Rim, which is a movie about giant monsters fighting giant robots for the fate of the universe. Well, not the universe, well, just Earth, but they're from another planet, so it might be the universe. We don't know. So giant robots fighting giant monsters. That was a mild success. It was big in China. It did warrant enough to get a sequel. This sequel opened #1 at the box office, dethroning Black Panther, that had an unprecedented 5 weeks #1 at the box office. Off the bat, this is a sequel to a 2013 film that I saw in theaters a couple times, and you have some people coming back. Charlie Day and Bern Gorman and Rinko Kikuchi. Some of the secondary players are coming back, but Charlie Hunnam, the main character of the first movie, was busy off filming King Arthur, Legend of the Sword, which is so bland and forgettable, and Idris Elba's character, spoiler alert for the first Pacific Rim, but it's been 5 years, and if you're interested in the sequel, you probably should see that one. He died at the end of the first one, so he's not returning, but he's a big presence in this one as John Boyega, Finn from Star Wars The Last Jedi, and from Star Wars The Force Awakens. He was in Attack of the Block. He is taking over as the son of Idris Elba, who wanted to be a Jaeger pilot, one of these guys that fight in the giant robots. But he was kicked out of the program and kind of resorted to like being a scavenger, where he's going to like the Jaeger scrap yard and these different places and finding all these bits of old Jaeger parts, because there's a black market for people trying to create their own Jaegers. And you see, there's a great montage where he's finding parts of old Jaegers and he's trading them in for soda and Oreo cookies, and it's just a fun moment in the movie. So he is squatting at a mansion, which is destroyed by a Kaiju, a giant monster that years ago fell on this mansion. So he's living about half a mansion, and you have this cool Kaiju like looking out your window, and you see this skeleton of this giant monster, and it is epic. So he's living there, and he's making a living by going to these scrap yards and these junkyards and getting these parts to these old Jaegers. Well, on one of these missions, he is hired by this guy to find this very important part that it used to power the Jaegers, and he runs into this other person, and then there's a chase scene. He gets there, and he finds that this person, Amara Nani, has built a Jaeger in her garage, and he's like, wow, I want this is worth a ton of money, and she's like, no, I put my heart and soul into this. So the cops come, or the Pacific, and they're like, you're in an unidentified Jaeger. We need you to leave this Jaeger. And she's like, no. So there's this epic chase scene. It's kind of like a hamster Jaeger, where it's smaller than the normal Jaeger. It's about not even a fourth of the size, and it just runs around, and she outmaneuvers one of the best Jaeger pilots in the Defense Corp. So because Jake Pentecost, John Boyega's character, has a history of his dad being a Jaeger pilot. He was in the Jaeger program before he kicked out. They're like, we're sending you both to jail unless you train this new cadet. And he's like, well, I don't want that, but that's the better alternative to jail time. So that's where the story starts, and that's where the story takes off from there. You see that he has old rivalries that he has to deal with. This world is amazing, and I love the first Pacific Rim. And this is 10 years later. There hasn't been any new Kaiju in 10 years. So the world is pretty safe, but yet this happened in the past, and cities were destroyed, major cities like Hong Kong and Sydney. So this is still in everybody's back of the mind, but they're safe for now, but there's still some people, like I said, like the Amari, who's like, these Kaiju will come back, and we aren't ready now, and we have to prepare for when they do come back. And it's just cool seeing how, like it would be in real life, you have the major cities that were destroyed, they're rebuilt quickly, but the suburbs still have all this evidence of this past war with these aliens that came from underneath the sea. And you have Jake Pentecost, who does not want to be like his father. He wants to be himself. He's more laid back and chill. And it has his relationship with this girl who's kind of like his adoptive sister, kind of like his adoptive daughter, where he has to take care of her because she has no family. And this relationship between the Jake Pentecost and the Amara character are the best parts of Pacific Rim Uprising. I really love their chemistry, and I think there's some backlash of she is a teenager, she is piloting these giant robots, and people are like, she doesn't serve a point in the story. I disagree 100%. I think the backbone of the story is these two characters. And I would have loved to see them in a Jaeger together, but he has this relationship with the Scott Eastwood character, the Nate Lambert, and they're the Jaeger pilots together. They're the drift-compatible ones. And he has to get over this incident that happened in the past with this character. And I did not like this relationship as much as his relationship with Amara. But the first Pacific Rim had great moments of action, and it had above-average character moments. This has some great character moments, and it has some above-average level of action. And this is two different movies combined to one. In the first half, you have these characters dealing with issues of your past. They have the world where there are monsters that destroy cities. You have to deal with the aftermath of these giant Godzilla-like Kaiju attacks happening every 4 months, every couple weeks or whatever, and rebuilding the world after that tragedy. And during this first half, you develop the relationships of the characters for the twist in the villain reveal. And there's a lot of people saying that this is silly, that this villain is... Why did it completely changed the tone of the movie? I think the twist worked. I think the villain reveal happened organically. And I can see the other side, but I really like the twist in the villain reveal. And I believe the second half, where you're talking about the giant monster moments, you finally get to the Kaiju and Jaeger battles. That's very fun action, but I think it works better if you understand these characters from the beginning. And this film is not as good as Pacific Rim, because you have Stephen DeKnight directing, who did the Spartacus miniseries, which I have not seen, as it's premium cable. But he is not as good as Guillermo del Toro, because Guillermo del Toro has an Oscar on itself for Best Director. Guillermo del Toro's style was what made the first film what it is. This is a different style. This is a more colorful film. This is a film that's more character-driven versus let's watch giant robots fight giant monsters. But I think this works as this film. The beginning of the film, I'm like, oh, you could show this film to somebody that hasn't seen the first movie, and then the twist comes, and I'm like, okay, now it's probably better to see the first movie before showing this. But if you're looking for a fun film to see this weekend, and you're not going to see any of the new releases like Ready Player One, I would highly recommend Pacific Rim Uprising. I did not like it as good as the first film, but I thought the first film was going to be great, and this film was going to be good. That film, the first Pacific Rim, is an 8.5 out of 10. And this film is just a little notch lower. I'd give it an 8 out of 10.